Greyhound shook his head. I was there. I don't need to watch it. He sat in the back. A rookie pilot approached him. Sir, why didn't you break off in the spiral? The manual says. The manual keeps you alive, Greyhound interrupted gently. But it's not a cage. Sometimes you have to do what isn't in the book. You can't surprise the other guy if you only do what he expects. But if it doesn't work? The rookie asked. Then you don't come home, Greyhound said simply. But you can't win by playing not to lose. The rookie nodded slowly and walked away. Greyhound leaned back, listening to the hum of the ship. The sea outside was endless and cold. He knew the Gripen pilot would be studying the tapes tonight. Next time he wouldn't fall for the same tricks. And that was fine. Greyhound would find another way. There was always another way. For now the day was his. 3 kills. 0 losses. In a jet most people thought belonged in a museum. He grabbed his helmet and walked out. On the bulletin board in the hallway, someone had already pinned up a picture from the simulation. The moment the Harrier sat right behind the Gripen, locked and ready. Underneath, in thick black marker, someone had written, "Never count out the old guns." Greyhound smiled one last time and walked down the corridor. Thanks for reading/listening. If you enjoyed this story of the underdog taking the sky, make sure to like and subscribe for more tales of hidden valor. Both jets climbed back up. In the Swedish cockpit, the pilot shook his head, replaying the last 30 seconds. Down on the deck, the betting had changed. No one was laughing anymore. The score was Harrier 1, Gripen 0. But Greyhound knew the next round would be the hardest. Round 3 started before the deck crew could finish their jokes. The Gripen came in hot. No hiding, just raw speed and power. He was hunting now. Greyhound felt the change instantly. The Swedish pilot was angry. He wanted to force a mistake. Fight's on, the AWACS said. The Gripen fired a long-range simulated missile immediately. Gripen Fox 3. Greyhound yanked his jet right, dragging the virtual missile down toward the water. His warning system screamed. 10 seconds to impact. He released chaff, small strips of metal to confuse the radar. 9 seconds. 8 seconds. He pulled a turn so tight the straps dug into his shoulders. The tone cut out. The missile had chased the chaff. The Gripen wasn't waiting. He dove down, wings flexing under the strain. He was coming into Greyhound's world. Greyhound slowed down, keeping the Harrier nimble. He saw a bank of fog forming over the water. Fog could be a trap or a hiding spot. Gripen closing 2 miles, the AWACS warned. Greyhound flew straight into the fog. Visibility dropped to 0. He flew by instinct and instruments. He knew the Gripen would follow the radar blip, even if he couldn't see. Greyhound popped out of the fog, spun the Harrier around using his nozzles and waited. The Gripen burst out a second later, flying straight into Greyhound's sights. The tone screamed. Greyhound squeezed the trigger. Fox 2. Kill confirmed. Harrier 2 for 0, the AWACS announced. The carrier deck erupted. It wasn't a glitch. They were watching the impossible happen. But Greyhound stayed focused. The Swedish pilot was learning fast. For the 4th round, the Gripen attacked from high above, diving like a spear. Greyhound climbed to meet him. They passed each other in a blur, the roar vibrating through the cockpit. Both turned hard to get behind the other. The Gripen was better this time. Every time Greyhound tried to turn, the Swedish jet cut inside, getting closer to a shot. A locked tone wailed in Greyhound's ear. He was in trouble. He used his nozzles to slow down rapidly, trying to make the Gripen fly past. The Swede expected it. He rolled upside down and dove, staying with the Harrier. Greyhound threw out flares and spiraled desperately toward the water. 207, you are defensive, the AWACS called. 500 feet. 300 feet. The ocean rushed up. Greyhound pulled up at the last second, skimming the waves. The tone cut out. He had escaped, but barely. It was a draw. No kills. But Greyhound knew the final round would decide everything. The radio was quiet. The wind seemed to drop. 2 kills for the Harrier. 1 narrow escape. 1 final fight to settle it. Greyhound flexed his stiff hands. He had been here before. 1 move would decide the winner. The Gripen appeared, diving from the clouds. He wasn't playing games. Fight's on, the AWACS barked. Greyhound flew straight at him. They crossed at incredible speed. The Gripen broke left, trying to get behind the Harrier. Greyhound pulled up into a vertical climb, nozzles down, roaring into the sky. The Swede matched him, rolling up to follow. They spiraled upward, neither gaining an advantage. The rulebook said to break off and try again. But Greyhound didn't follow the rulebook. He slammed his nozzles fully down, stopping his forward motion completely. The Harrier hung in the air like a brick. The Gripen shot past, but the Swedish pilot saw it coming. He rolled and dove under the Harrier. Now Greyhound was chasing, but he was too far back to shoot. The Gripen twisted away. Multiple bogeys inbound, the AWACS called. 2 contacts high and fast. They were adding more simulated enemies. If the Gripen kept Greyhound busy for another 30 seconds, those new enemies would kill him. So, Greyhound broke the rules again. Instead of chasing the Gripen, he turned and dove toward the new threats. The Gripen pilot hesitated. Was Greyhound crazy? Had he lost track of the fight? That split second of doubt was all Greyhound needed. He leveled out just above the waves, then pulled up into a rolling climb. As he rolled, he swiveled his nozzles, slowing down while reversing direction. The Gripen, thinking he had an opening, dove to chase, and flew right into the trap. Greyhound dropped out of his roll right behind the Swedish jet. Point-blank range. The tone went solid. Fox 2. Kill confirmed. Harrier 3 for 0. End exercise, the AWACS said. A moment later, the Gripen pilot's voice came over the radio. Quiet and respectful. Nicely done, Harrier. Didn't think that thing could dance like that. Greyhound smiled. It can if you stop worrying about the rulebook. Back on the deck, the crew cheered as the Harrier rolled to a stop. Greyhound opened the canopy, letting the cold air rush in. His flight suit was soaked. The analysts would study the tapes. They would talk about physics and angles. But Greyhound knew the truth. It wasn't about the machine. It was about being willing to risk everything, pride, reputation, the life of the jet, on a move that shouldn't have worked. Greyhound shut down the engine. The deck crew swarmed in, securing the jet. Their eyes met his with nods of respect. They had all heard. He climbed down the ladder, his boots hitting the deck with a thud. A young deckhand ran up, breathless. Sir, they're still talking about it. They're calling it the backflip kill. Greyhound chuckled. It's just a maneuver. The name doesn't matter. But he knew it would stick. The Swedish pilot walked over a few minutes later. He looked calm, his swagger gone. He extended a hand. That was unexpected, the Swede said. Greyhound shook his hand. That's the point, isn't it? The Swede nodded. We train for the predictable. Today you reminded me why the unpredictable wins. Later, in the ready room, the younger pilots were huddled around the screens, replaying the fight. The training officer called out, "You'll want to watch this, Greyhound. The analysts are going to use it for training." They said the Sea Harrier was too old. Too slow. A relic from the past that stood no chance against a modern jet. In a fight against Sweden's Gripen Charlie, everyone was sure the Harrier would be nothing more than target practice. But what they didn't know was that today, the ocean skies were about to prove them wrong. Have you ever seen an underdog humiliate the favorite in front of a crowd that swore it couldn't happen? The North Atlantic wind was sharp and cold. It whistled through the towers of the aircraft carrier and whipped sea spray against the steel hull. The massive ship pushed forward into a wall of gray clouds, the deck vibrating with every gust. Far away, an AWACS plane watched silently, its radar scanning everything for 100 miles. Greyhound, the Harrier pilot, had been awake since before the sun came up. His real name was Commander Philip Rawlings, but here, everyone just called him Greyhound. The nickname had stuck with him since the Falklands War, a nod to his tall, lean build and his relentless style in a dogfight. He had flown Sea Harriers when they were brand new, fighting over icy waters and surviving enough close calls to know that experience mattered more than any statistic on a piece of paper. This morning's briefing had been short. The mission, dissimilar air combat training. Harrier versus Gripen. 3 rounds. Simulated weapons. The AWACS plane would confirm any kills. The Swedish pilot flying the Gripen was young, sharp, and aggressive. He had grown up with advanced technology and helmet-mounted sights. On paper, this wasn't a fair fight. The Gripen had better radar, climbed faster, and turned better. But the Harrier had a trick up its sleeve. It had a thrust vectoring system, nozzles that could rotate to point the engine's power down or back. This let it perform maneuvers other fighters couldn't dream of. And it had a pilot who knew exactly how to use every ounce of that advantage. As the pilots prepared, a deck crew member muttered, "Hope the Swede goes easy, or we'll be fishing Harrier parts out of the ocean." Another laughed. "More likely he'll paint a picture of the Harrier on his jet by lunchtime." Greyhound didn't say a word. He just pulled on his helmet, strapped it tight, and lowered his visor. Inside the cockpit, the Sea Harrier felt like an old, comfortable leather jacket. Worn, scuffed, but a perfect fit. His hands moved over the switches without him even having to look. Master arms safe. Nozzles neutral. Flaps checked. The Pegasus engine roared to life, a deep, metallic sound that shook the deck. He could smell the familiar scent of hydraulic fluid and burnt fuel, the smell of 1,000 missions. Further down the deck, the Griffin's engine shrieked awake. It sounded like tearing air. Its small front wings, called canards, twitched as the pilot checked his controls. The jet looked sleek and dangerous, armed with the latest simulated missiles. It looked like the Predator everyone said it was. The air boss's voice crackled over the radio. Harrier 207 Gripen 14, you are cleared for launch. AWACS will call the start. The deck crew moved like dancers. A man in a yellow vest crouched low, signaling Greyhound forward. The blast deflector rose up behind the jet. Greyhound took a deep breath. He could feel the eyes watching him from the ship's rails, could almost hear the bets being made against him. He remembered 1982. The low clouds over the Falklands. The sudden rush of adrenaline when radar pings turned into missile warnings. He remembered what it felt like to be underestimated. The signal came. He pushed the throttle forward. The Harrier surged, then lifted almost straight up, leaping off the deck like a bird flushing from cover. The Gripen launched seconds later, banking hard right to climb. Below, the carrier became a small dark spot on the gray sea. Above, the clouds broke, revealing patches of blue sky. The AWACS controller spoke calmly. Harrier 207, Gripen 14. Fight's on. Greyhound dropped his jet low, skimming just above the waves until sea spray hit his canopy. The Gripen stayed high, circling like a hawk. It was the classic setup. Old versus new, slow versus fast. Everyone watching expected the Harrier to be shot down in the first minute. Greyhound had other plans. The Gripen moved first. From 15,000 feet, the Swedish pilot dipped his nose and picked up speed. His radar found the Harrier down low, and a soft tone in his ear told him his missile was ready. Greyhound knew the lock was coming. He wanted it. Flying low over the ocean was like hiding in a maze. Every wave created clutter on the radar, giving him a few precious seconds of confusion. Up high, the Gripen pilot radioed, 207, I've got you. Greyhound didn't answer. Instead, he eased a lever forward, rotating his engine nozzles just enough to slow down without climbing. His altitude stayed at 50 feet, but he suddenly stopped moving forward as fast. To the Gripen's computer, the numbers went crazy. The target seemed to pause in midair. The Swedish pilot tried to fire anyway, locking his simulated heat-seeking missile onto the Harrier. He squeezed the trigger. Greyhound counted to 3. Then he pulled. It was pure Sea Harrier magic. Nozzles down. Thrust vectoring hard. The nose swung up and the jet almost stopped in the sky. Spray fanned out below him as the Harrier climbed straight up, a move the Gripen couldn't copy without stalling. The simulated missile followed where the Harrier should have been, slamming uselessly into the sea spray. By the time the Gripen pilot realized what happened, the Harrier was gone from his front view and was suddenly behind him. Gripen 14, you're defensive, the AWACS called out. Adrenaline spiked in the Swedish cockpit. The young pilot yanked his stick, turning hard to try and make the Harrier overshoot. But Greyhound knew the Gripen lost energy in hard turns down low. He stayed right on him. The tone in Greyhound's headset sang a steady note. He had a lock. Fox 2, Greyhound said calmly. Kill confirmed, the AWACS replied. Harrier 207 guns. 1 for 0. On the carrier deck, jaws dropped. A young crewman stared at his friend. No way. That has to be a glitch. Greyhound didn't smile. No victory dance. He just reset for round 2, scanning the sky for the Gripen. The Swedish pilot came back smarter this time. He stayed low, using the clouds to hide. He wasn't going to fall for the same trick twice. Greyhound climbed slightly. He wanted to be seen just enough to tempt the Gripen into chasing him. The Swede took the bait, hitting his afterburner to close the gap. From the ship, it looked like a slow-motion chase. The stubby Harrier running away, the sleek Gripen slicing through the clouds to catch it. The lock tone sounded again. This time, Greyhound didn't try to disappear. He waited until the last possible second. Then he cut the power, dropped his nozzles and rolled upside down. The Harrier dropped like a stone. The Gripen flew right past him, shooting through the empty air where the Harrier used to be. As Greyhound leveled out 50 feet above the water, his radar screen was clear. The Gripen had overshot again. End of engagement, the AWACS called. Reset for round 3.